Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Gridlock of the Mind. The 405 stretched endlessly before me, a vein of asphalt pulsing with the dull monotony of brake lights. Every morning, I merged into the current of half-conscious souls, each of us trapped in the same routine, inching forward to destinations we resented. My corporate job barely paid my bills, and my spirit eroded with each passing day. Yet, like a prisoner resigned to their cell, I got into my car every morning, hoping, futilely, that something, anything, would change. Today felt no different. The same stifling air, the same murmur of the radio, the same dull ache pressing behind my eyes. I stared ahead, watching as the red taillights blinked and glowed in a never-ending pattern, hypnotic in their rhythm. I sighed, my hands gripping the wheel. This wasn't life. This was something else. Some cruel purgatory where change was an illusion. As I drove, a strange sensation washed over me, an unsettling tug at the back of my mind. It was faint at first, like the nagging feeling of forgetting something important. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Had I left the stove on? No, I hadn't cooked in days. My laptop? No, it was in my bag, thrown onto the passenger seat in my usual morning autopilot. Then what? My phone rang, vibrating against the plastic cup holder. The number flashed on the screen. Unknown, but I knew better. Bill collectors. I clenched my jaw before answering, already bracing myself. Hello? A voice on the other end rattled off my name, their tone all business, all demand. We're calling about your outstanding balance. I exhaled sharply, my frustration boiling over. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I just forgot? I'm sitting in traffic, wasting my life away every single day to make barely enough to survive. And you think I magically have money for you? Tell me, how am I supposed to pay you when I can't even afford to live? Silence. A pause. Then the collector launched into their script again, as if my words meant nothing. I hung up. Hard. The phone clattered onto the seat, and I turned the music up. Loud. A mix of music and Spotify affirmations played in an endless loop. You are strong. You are capable, a voice repeated. but the words felt hollow against the weight pressing down on me. I switched back to music, something loud enough to drown it all out. But after a few minutes, I found myself back on the affirmations, searching for something, anything that might stick. You are in control of your life, the voice insisted. I scoffed, flipping back to music again. The bass thumped through my chest, rattling through my bones, drowning out the rage, the helplessness, the crushing weight of it all. I shook the feeling off and pressed forward. But the thought gnawed at me, creeping into the corners of my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. The traffic slowed, locking me into a dead stop between exits. I drummed my fingers against the wheel, the silence growing unbearable. Something was wrong. Something was missing. The air inside the car felt heavier now, oppressive. I adjusted my rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of my own eyes, shadowed and hollow. Was it always this way? Was I always this way? The weight of exhaustion bore down on me. My limbs felt heavier than they should. Had I slept enough last night? Had I ever slept enough? I closed my eyes, taking slow, steady breaths. But when I opened them, the scenery outside seemed different. The colors muted, the sounds dampened. My vision blurred for a moment before snapping back into focus. But the creeping unease remained. I was losing time. One moment, I was at the interchange, and the next, I was pulling into the parking garage beneath my office building. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady, as if I had forgotten how to walk. The air felt wrong, too thick, too still. I moved through the lobby, the fluorescent lights above buzzing softly, pressing against my skull like a dull migraine. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped inside. The mirrored walls reflected me back at myself, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something else. A blur, a shadow of someone who wasn't quite me. I blinked, and it was gone. The doors opened to my floor, and I walked down the sterile hallway, my footsteps muffled against the carpet. My hands were cold, my breath shallow. My mind screamed at me to turn back, to run, but my body moved forward, as if caught in the undertow of a dream. I reached my office door, hesitated, then turned the knob. The room was dark. The air smelled of familiarity, of something deeply personal. My breath hitched as I took a step inside, and the walls expanded, morphing, shifting. No, I wasn't at the office. I was home. My bedroom lay before me, unchanged and untouched, as if I had never left. My unmade bed, the half-empty coffee cup on my nightstand, the soft hum of the city outside my window. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering. How? I had driven here. I had spent an hour in traffic. I had been walking into my office just moments ago. I turned, reaching for the door, but when I opened it, there was no hallway, just the same road, the same endless stretch of the 405. My hands trembled as I turned back toward my room, only to find it dissolving around me, slipping through my fingers like sand. And then I was back in my car. Traffic had barely moved. The radio played the same mindless chatter, and the clock on my dashboard blinked mockingly. 7:45 a.m., just like it always was. I let out a shaky breath, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My skin felt cold. My pulse raced. What was real? Where had I been? And then the realization hit me. I was late. I was still home, still in bed, still asleep. The panic rose, clawing up my throat as I fumbled for my phone, desperate to check the time, to wake myself up. But when I looked down, my hands weren't there. The car, the traffic, the drive, it wasn't real. I never left my bed. I was still dreaming, or living a nightmare over and over, falling to conclusions. Fear can make you do crazy things. Cry, laugh, scream, even kill. At this precise moment, it is causing a man named Joe to run for his life. It is also causing 7 members of an unknown faction to chase him. Joe doesn't know where he is going, only that he has to get away. His chest pulses in and out as his body tries to drag in air to compensate for all the running. His legs ache as he pushes them to go faster. A voice in his head urges him on. We need to go faster. Shut up. You think I don't know that? It's your fault we're running in the first place. Gosh, a guy can't have a little fun. You killed those guys. Correction, you killed those guys. As far as anyone else knows, I am just a figment of your imagination. Besides, now you can be certain that the men who killed your family have been punished for their actions. I didn't need your help. The police would have handled it. Now these guys are chasing us. Less complaining, more running. Joe continues sprinting through the autumn-colored trees, looking for an escape. As he taps into his second wind, he sees sunlight beaming down ahead. He gets to a bright clearing, a good distance ahead of his pursuers. The beginnings of a sigh of relief melt into a sigh of despair. On the other side of the very narrow leaf-filled clearing is a very wide, rock-filled gorge. He skids to the edge, kicking a few dozen leaves over the edge. Gasping for air, with his hands on his knees, he watches as the leaves slowly pinwheel out of sight. A good 1,000-foot drop followed by slopes of jagged rock. I'll definitely feel that in the morning. We could make it. Shut up. No, we can't. I could make it. Well, I can't. He takes a step back and puts his hands behind his back as he tries to catch his breath. As he turns around, a single man wearing green, brown, and black fatigues skids into the clearing. He sees Joe and raises his assault rifle. The gun trembles slightly as the soldier trains it on him. Joe watches as the nervous soldier's finger tightens slightly on the trigger. A single bead of sweat slides down the soldier's forehead as he begins to talk. We're gonna need you to come with us. I'm afraid I can't do that. That's right. Tell him. We aren't going anywhere with him. Puh, please, we're not gonna hurt you. I find that hard to believe. If I remember correctly, you guys were shooting at me not too long ago. Come on. There's only one of him. We can take him. We just want to talk to you. Do some tests. Ask some questions. What if you don't like what you hear? What if your tests and your questions don't get you the answers that you want? What then? Huh? Why haven't we killed him yet? Would you shut up already? Who are you talking to? Nobody, okay. I think I'll decline. Wow, I didn't think you had it in ya. That is not an option! A different voice booms from within the trees. The rest of the group bursts into the clearing, all wearing matching fatigues. Their assault rifles are all trained on him. Just answer me one question. Why do you have to be able to explain everything? Why do you have to know how everything works? Joe yells with tears of anger welling up in his eyes. Are you crying? What a baby. How about less crying and more killing? If it isn't normal, let's chase it down and shoot at it with automatic weapons and force it to cooperate. Find out how it works by any means necessary. You people disgust me. If you don't kill them soon, I will. Would you shut up already, sir? I don't know who you are talking to, but we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Well, as my mother always said, if it's not hard, then it is not worth doing. Whoa, what are you doing? They are looking for a reason to kill us. If they kill me, you die too. As Joe says this, he slowly takes his hands from behind his back. A 40-inch, sleek, razor-sharp, black katana is held firmly in each hand. As they see the blades, their fingers squeeze the triggers. Volleys of bullets fly towards Joe, each trying to reach the target first. His swords move lightning fast as he takes into account where on his body they are aiming and tries to deflect as many bullets as possible. Despite his efforts, he's breathing through a couple new holes by the time they need to reload. They watch anxiously as Joe stumbles forward. The sword in his left hand sticks into the ground and keeps him from falling all the way to the ground. He leans heavily on the sword as ragged, shallow breaths tear out of him. Dark red blood stains his shirt and pants in various places. He sways, but manages to stand, leaving the sword embedded in the ground. He tries to look at them, but the 7 soldiers double into 14. He shakes his head. and tries again, but the 14 soldiers are now swimming in front of his vision. He settles on focusing on the group as a whole, seeing the forest, not the trees. Did I pass the test? Oh well, my answer is still no. If you want my body, you'll have to fetch it. Joe slurs. You are seriously losing it. You are going to get us killed. No, don't! Joe spreads his arms and falls backwards off of the cliff. The soldiers dash to the edge and see him falling. He watches as the edge of the cliff and their faces shrink away from him. The wind whips his clothes wildly as it accelerates past him. He closes his eyes, slows his breathing, and concentrates. Suddenly, the sound of the wind slows and then stops. He opens his eyes and sees that he is now floating in mid-air. A faint glow and a quiet hum emanates from his left hand. He looks down and sees that about 5 feet under him is one particularly sharp shard of black rock that would have ended up right through his chest. He also notices that his vision has blacked out on the edge. Something was wrong. What did you do? I took over. It's obvious that you were on a suicide mission with that little stunt you pulled. I did too much work to get this body to just let you destroy us like this. He contemplates his grisly death for a second before reorienting himself. Using the power from his hands, he zooms back up towards the cliff edge. His head pops up over the ridge as the 7 soldiers are leaving the clearing. They walk slowly and lackadaisically back into the trees in a single file line. Apparently, his guaranteed death is good enough for them. His anger intensifies with this nonchalant disregard for him as a person. The fact that they don't really care about retrieving the body pisses him off. They even left his sword exactly where it got stuck in the ground. The nails on his right hand dig into his palm as his grip tightens on the sword. The angry look on his face morphs into a grin. He is going to enjoy what is about to happen. He floats back onto the cliff and lands silently on the ground. He quietly picks up his second sword and zips to the soldier, bringing up the rear. In one swift moment, he puts one sword through his back and uses the second sword to separate his head from his body. The head spins wildly as it tumbles into a nearby pile of leaves. He pushes the soldier's body out of the way and heads towards the second soldier. The second soldier gets cut down in one stroke, starting from his right shoulder and ending at his left hip. As the top half of the body slides away diagonally from the bottom half, Joe sees that the other soldiers have become aware of his presence. Their eyes widen and their mouths hang open as they realize the man that they thought was dead, is still very much alive. Joe uses the moment of hesitation to close in. The third soldier is split vertically in half as Joe brings the sword right up through the middle of him, splitting him in half like a deli sandwich. He steps through the space the third soldier's body once occupied and heads toward the fourth soldier. He rams both swords into the soldier's abdomen and sees the soldier's eyes widen with pain. He pulls both swords in opposite directions, shredding the soldier's midsection. He lifts his foot and kicks the soldier, sending his body to the ground with a thump. 4 down, 3 to go. The remaining 3 soldiers spread out and raise their assault rifles. Not this time, Joe snarls at them. Not like this. It was never supposed to be like this. He spins the swords one time in his hands as he steps over the fourth soldier's quickly cooling body. Raising the swords in his hands, he throws them at the 2 outside soldiers. Both soldiers are struck between the eyes before they even get off a shot. The force of the swords knock them both backwards. One of the swords plunges into the ground, propping the 5th soldier's body up at a 15-degree angle. Gravity slowly pulls the body down the blood-soaked blade. The other blade pins the 6th soldier head first to the gnarled trunk of a nearby tree. This time, gravity works quicker and splits his skull as his body slumps to the ground. Joe, now weaponless, bravely strides toward the last soldier. As the final soldier goes to shoot, Joe grabs the end of his gun and quickly shoves it up. The single shot the soldier gets off intertwines with the painful crunch of bones as the gun sight collides with his nose. The shot flies harmlessly into the air above their heads. The final soldier stumbles backwards, struggling to pull air through his bloodied nostrils. The strap attached to the rifle, still in Joe's hand, keeps him from falling. Joe pulls the barrel of the gun down a couple of inches and jams it under the soldier's chin. The soldier is still dazed from his new breathing impairment and doesn't even realize what is happening. The automatic fire perforating his brain quickly takes care of his need to breathe. Joe's grin widens into a smile as he looks at his work. They were right to fear me, Joe thinks to himself. Not like this. He prepares to go retrieve his swords when a mysterious pain stops him in his tracks. His head feels like it is about to split open. He slams his eyes shut, trying to not pass out. When he reopens his eyes, all he can see is a bright orange light. He blinks a couple times and realizes that he is on his back, staring up at the setting sun. He looks down and sees a sharp, blood-stained rock protruding from his stomach, looking like a blood volcano just sprouted out of his chest. His mind struggles to come to terms with what has just happened. but his eviscerated midsection makes it hard. He tries to speak, but all that comes out of his mouth is a splatter of blood. It was all in his mind. No miraculous survival, no sweet revenge, no daring escape. Just a terrified man sprawled, broken and bloodied, at the bottom of a rocky gorge. He lived his life in fear, and it was this fear that eventually drove him to his death. At least the voice in his head is finally quiet. His gasping breaths slow, as the last thing he sees is the sun slipping beneath the horizon. Fear can make you do crazy things. Cry, laugh, scream, even kill. Right about now, it was the last thought that crossed Joe's mind as his brain seeped out of his shattered skull. Black and white, the boardroom. 32 students awake in a dark room. The lights flash on. 32 fearful high school students scan their surroundings. They're in a square room. The walls are lovely nature murals. The floor is a large, square black and white checkerboard. And they're in costumes. 16 are black and 16 white. Esther starts the confused students' conversation. "Oh, my lord, where are we?" Barney, the school's head nerd, is dressed in black leather and a crown. "How did I got here?" Johnny, the high school star quarterback, is dressed in white leather and a king's crown. "We, nerd. How did we all get here?" Susie, head cheerleader, adorned in a dazzling black sequined dress and crown, clings to Johnny. "We were all at Dr. Gilbert's party." Jerry, "Right. I remember we all toasted the good doctor's birthday." Jill, "Yes, I can't recall much after that." Billy Joe, "The punch. I bet the punch was spiked." Sally, "How did I get dressed in this?" Mark and Ken are examining the walls, looking for an exit, only to find 2 bathroom door. Mayview Police Depot. The FBI Child Abduction Unit arrives at the Mayview City Police Department. Captain Montaigne, "I appreciate your rapid response. Agent Joseph Klein, what have you got?" Captain, "There was a party at a Mayview High School mathematician's house on Friday night that the missing teens seem to have attended." Sergeant Billings, "Sir, they're being live streamed." Agent Klein makes a call. "Agent Newton, I need your unit to find this channel's origin. I just linked to you." Live chess. A placard on the wall reads, "Welcome to live chess. 1. This is a standard 12-hour game of chess. 2. Your costume denotes your position and side. 3. Your kings are Johnny and Barney, both well-ranked players. 4. Breaks are 10 minutes each hour. The teens are quiet momentarily as they read, then break into a confusing garble of voices until Ben, a well-known school bully, yells, "Shut up, all of you." They do. He continues, "Who the hell you think you are? I will knock your teeth out." A loud crack sounds out. Ben collapses and slides down a wall onto the floor. Blood oozes from his mouth. Screams fill the room. A door opens, and in walks another student, Henry. A masked man drags Ben back inside the door, then closes it. Henry, what the hell is going on? Overhead, a voice breaks in. I'm the director and judge. I don't tolerate dissidents. Now that's settled. Let's begin, shall we? Take your positions. White on the wall's time clock side. The frightened, crying teens start moving into position. Sally crying and shaking. I don't know where to go. King Barney. Over there, in the second row, with Susie, Jill, Mary, Gary, Ken, and Mike. You're all pawns. Voice. Well done. The clock will tick down from 12 hours for each team. It starts and stops with each move. The winning team lives, or shall I say, those left standing will live. Kimmy, the white king-side light-squared bishop, LSB, cries out, What does he mean? Voice. The game is one of death, not of capturing players, resulting in another wave of mass hysteria. White King Johnny. What the hell? Voice. Let the game begin. King Johnny, make your move. A dual digital timer on the wall starts counting down. W. Chart 11.59. B. Opening. Johnny, the HS quarterback, confused and shaking, instantly decides pawn to E4. Voice. Johnny, they're more than pawns. They're your classmates. They're living people, at least for the moment. Brings another burst of loud conversing, screams, and crying. Mary runs, screaming, I can't do this. A loud crack echoes throughout the room. Mary halts, drops to the ground, and cringes down into a fetal position. Voice. Mary, that was a warning. Get back, now. She doesn't move. I said, now, Mary. Another crack erupts, and the wall splinters beside her head. Mary screams, then runs back to her square. Johnny, G, Gary, move to the E4 square. Gary, W, where's that? Johnny, 2 squares in front of you. The white one. Gary steps up to the center of the board. Barney, C5. Elizabeth, move up 2 squares. She quickly responds. That's right, the dark square. Voice. Very good. See how easy it is to play and obey. Johnny, you're up. Johnny, knight to F3. Henry, do you play? Henry, yes. Susie, Sally, excuse me, please. And he moves up 2 and over 1 square, as knights do. Barney, knight to C6. Sarah, move behind Elizabeth on the white square. Johnny, Billy, you're our light-squared bishop. Step in front of me to E2. BE2. Strategy. Barney, may I ask a question? Voice. Of course. Your clock is ticking, Barney. If we capture a piece, what happens to the player? Voice. Again. It's not a capture game. It is a game of life and death. Barney. The person dies? Voice. I think you know the answer, Black King Barney. Barney, what happens if there is a checkmate without any captures? Voice. The winning team walks away. The losing team, well, they don't. Barney, can we huddle? Voice. 2 heads are better than 1. Barney. Everyone who plays chess, raise your hand. The black team's bishops, Tamer and Samuel. The knights, Michael and Sarah. And 1 rook, Matthew, raise their hands along with 3 pawns, Eve, Miriam, and Luke. Barney. Okay, let's huddle and discuss our next move. No one moves. Voice. You can converse during your move. The bishops and knights slowly and hesitantly walk over to Barney. Barney. How you doing? Tamar, tears flowing. Scared shitless, of course. The others nod in agreement. Barney. I didn't want to talk about the move. I know the best move with Johnny's Sicilian defense. I want to discuss strategy. If we capture a person, Samuel, they will be shot. Sarah, who is this psychopath? Luke, his voice is masked and he knows us. Michael, a teacher? Barney, I think so, but our absence must have the FBI involved. So, if we can draw out the game with no captures, Tamar, kill. This sick will murder them. Barney, right, so let's make moves to prolong the game. Sarah, sounds like a good plan. The others nod in agreement. Barney, okay, good. Michael, let's play D6. It's a good counter to the Sicilian, and no chance for a kill. Barney, my thought as well. The teens shake in agreement. Billy Joe, Johnny is my boyfriend and aggressive in football and chess. He's good and will go for the win. Sarah, no, he won't. Billy Joe, what makes you think that? Sarah, you're on our side. You die if he wins. The players return to their positions. Barney, D6. Miriam, move up 1 step. W23.55.09. B23, 03. Johnny. Rose, you're our king's knight. Move in front of Jill. Barney, knight to F6 for you, Michael. Michael, got it. Samuel, you're moving so fast. Barney, it's just the opening. We can slow down during the mid-game. That's expected. Bishop Samuel. Okay, that makes sense. He may get mad if look to be stalling. Johnny, let's castle. Jill, move beside me, and I'll move to the inside beside you. Barney, shall we fianchetto kingside? Tamar, yes, good call. Black king. Barney, okay, Daniel, step up 1 square to G6. Next, light squared Bishop Billy will move behind you to G7. And then we will castle. Johnny, Mary, step up 1 to back up Gary. D3. Blacks, Bishop Daniel slides over to G7. White King Johnny. We're still opening. Our stance in martial arts terms. Bishop Kimmy, slide in front of Bishop Billy. Black King Barney and Rook Matthew switch sides to castle. FBI, Captain Montaigne. It has been 24 hours since 34 high school students were abducted. Dr. Gilbert's neighbors have only revealed that he had a large cargo truck that was heard leaving his residence in the early morning hours after the party, then disappeared. Agent Klein, Dr. Gilbert is a millionaire who does not need to work. He withdrew vast amounts of cash over the last few years and spent his weekends away. Where to? We are seeking to ascertain, along with tracing the video feed. We see the students are all alive except one. Live chess has gone viral. We are hesitant to shut it down as he may retaliate against the kids. Officer Dave, yes, he shot one, and Celia is missing. Agent Klein, perhaps not. Video analysis seems to indicate a scam, a fake death, like in the movies. He has a degree in mathematics and is a psychologist. Officer Gentry, a sick one. He is tormenting them. Agent Klein. Chess has 32 pieces, 16 per side. If you promote a pawn to the other side, you get a piece of your choice. Celia may be in waiting as the extra queen if one side promotes a pawn. Agent, obviously, our best is to track his video feed. He is bouncing off dark web torrent sites worldwide. He is good. Our cybercrime unit is on it. We will keep you updated, Captain Montaigne. We will continue our local search for sites able to house a 50 by 50 foot room and use infrared heat sensing, although they may be underground. What's new with the West search progress, Kelly? Mid-game, Johnny. Okay, now we're in the mid-game, and we're at an advantage to strike in the middle. But I don't want anyone else to die, so let's just make a non-confrontational move. Queen Esther. Barney and I are dating. He is brilliant, uses his mind, and despises violence. We should just hop around. I can step over one and back up Bishop Kimmy. Rose. That looks aggressive, forcing a dark bishop trade, but we don't have to go through with it. Johnny. Perfect. Queen Esther. Step over to QC1. Barney. Let's huddle. Okay, my friends. It looks as they want to force a bishop trade and end up with their Q in front of me. Billy Joe. Don't take any chances with Johnny. He will save himself first. He will pick his team and friends over me. Barney. Okay, we can avoid a trade. Matthew. How? Barney. Rook Matthew. Step to the side. One for rook to e8. King Johnny. Good move by them. They don't want a trade or fight. The clock reads W23 Uzo Bier Suinti. Voice. Break time. A wall opens, revealing a large table with a feast of food and drinks. The bathroom doors pop open. One is labeled guys and the other gals. Break time. The young women gather. Johnny runs to Billy Joe, and they hug, as do other couples. Billy Joe. Oh, Johnny, I'm so scared. Johnny. We all are, Billy Joe. We all are. Barney. I'm famished. He and Esther walk to the snack table. Esther. I need to pee. Be right back. The Black King. walks up to the Black King. Johnny greets him with, "What's up, nerd?" Barney, "We need to work together and figure this out." Johnny, "Sorry. Yeah, you're right. What do you have in mind?" He takes the last bite of a hot dog. Barney, "If we make a capture, the person dies." Johnny, "Right. So, we need to move around, keep the game going." Barney, "That's logical, but I'm sure he thought of that." Johnny, "All we can do is try." Barney, "Perhaps the cops will find us." Johnny, "The FBI is hunting for us." Barney, "Right. So let us keep the game going till time runs out." Johnny, "Okay. We need not to let any side run out their clock." Esther, "How do we do that?" Billy Joe, "Make our moves on 10-minute intervals." Johnny, "Perfect." Barney, "That's 6 moves per hour times 24 hours, which comes out to 120 moves each." Esther, "Let's make them 15 minutes. Barney, "I agree. That way we maximize the game length." Esther, "Watch the clock and pray the FBI finds us." Upstairs, Dr. Gilbert smiles. "Breaks over. Back to your positions. King Johnny, your move." Johnny, "Hey, Barney." Barney, "Yeah, Johnny. I'm really sorry. And I know I can speak for my football team. I'm truly sorry for all the nerd harassment we've given you and your friends over the years." Barney, "Ah, heck. Water under the bridge, Johnny. Let's just get through this and let bygones be bygones." The two smile and walk to their sides of the board, both holding back tears to move to lose scenario. The Black and White Kings and their teams continue the game, making move after move without players attacking other players. After the 90th move, and with only a few hours left, Dr. Gilbert, whose name was still unknown to the students and video stream audience, finally spoke. Voice, "Well, you all have been having fun, right? I'm not stupid, you know. I have been building and planning this game for years. Do you all realize that if this game ends in a draw or stalemate, in other words, when the clock runs out and no kills have been made, do you realize both teams lose? Do you understand what happens to the losers?" Barney, "No one goes home." Voice, correct. Johnny, "What happens if one person is sacrificed?" Voice, "The team losing the piece loses. If there's a recapture, piece value decides. Break time. It's pizza. W014506. B14609. The exhausted teens had stopped crying many long hours ago. Their mood devolved into hopelessness. Most feel numb. Their conversation was replaced with inward personal reflection. Life before this horrid weekend. Football game fun and laughs. Moments with their friends, their loves, and their families. Upon this new revelation, a lose-lose scenario where at least half will die. The crying and severe depression returned as their end was near. The physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted teens collapse on the checkered floor and devour 16 large pizzas. Billy Joe, so much for our stalemate plan. We're screwed. Now what are we going to do? Barney, someone needs to be sacrificed for the rest of us? Esther, no, it's not that simple. Henry, she's right. One sacrifice means the losing team. All of them don't make it home. Billy Joe, Lordy, what are we going to do? Johnny, flip a coin. The loser takes a hit. It doesn't matter who dies first, as all 16 will be sacrificed. Barney flips. Johnny guesses wrong. Henry, I'll do it. Rose is in a position to take me. FBI, Captain. We just got a call from Jerry's Pizza in Littleford. Somebody just picked up an order of 16 pizzas. Jerry said that was highly unusual. We're running the license plate run now. Agent Klein, get the SWAT team in the chopper. Sergeant Newton, Captain, we have an address. End game. W000-100, B00010, Billy Joe. Time to make the call, Barney. Barney, I can't. Billy Joe, tears in her eyes. I know. It is either half of us or all of us. Barney, Rose, walk over to Henry Square. Rose, tears flowing. No, I won't be able to live with myself. Billy Joe, none of us will. Rose, none of us. Barney, angered, we'll all forever be haunted. Night Rose slowly moves up 2 squares over one and steps into Henry's Square. Oh, Henry, I'm so sorry. Henry, Rose, I volunteered. You're not to blame. Voice, Barney, you're up. Barney, what do you mean? Voice, it's time to slay. Barney, so, go ahead. Live with your cruelty. Voice, oh, not I, your kingship. Barney, what do you mean? Voice, you as king chose. You as king follow through. Barney, I will not murder. Voice, you may have Rose perform the deed. Barney, I will not. Voice, do you choose a draw? Barney, help everyone. What do I do? Voice, tick, tick, tick. Barney, let's vote. A team vote. Voice, ah, a king chooses democracy. How noble. Barney, those in favor of a draw walk to the other team. Those who want me to murder Henry and everyone on their side dies remain here. The room, filled with stunned, angered, and crying teens, suddenly turns into a loud, confusing uproar. Miriam breaks the hysteria, yelling out, "Quiet, everyone, please." The room quiets. Miriam, well known for her environmental protests, continues, "I say all of us. Personally, I could not live with myself, knowing I chose to be part of a murder. To murder any of you. I suggest we all join hands and refuse to put up with this madman's sick game any longer." Gary, no way. We don't all have to die, only half. Sally takes Gary in her arms and hugs him. He struggles and then collapses, crying. Quiet mumbling now fills the room. Matthew takes Miriam's hand into his. followed by rows, until finally 32 teens sit in the middle of a sizable black and white game board. Some have been friends since early childhood, some lovers, some enemies, for various reasons that seem silly now. 32 colored teens, white, yellow, red, black, and brown, sit quietly, looking around at their peers' multi-ethnic faces. They are emotionally spent, feeling their common humanity, and finding comfort in each other. Dr. Gilbert sits upstairs, smiling. Millions worldwide are fixed on their screens, devices streaming live chess, awaiting the endgame finale. Breaking news: 34 students who recently went missing were found this morning after millions worldwide watched in horror. Live chess, a divisive game attempting to pit Mayview High School students against each other. The teens, previously at odds with each other, joined forces to devise various strategies. They refused the cruel psychopath's rules. Dr. Gilbert conducted what he termed a psychological experiment, and a success beyond his pre-game hypothesis of teen behavior. He remains at large. All the students were found alive. 1 year later, 32 students awake in a dark room. I spy with my little eye. It's funny, the things one thinks about when staring dramatically out the window. Even funnier, the things we do. I stopped racing raindrops a few miles back when I kept winning. My mother was right. Winning at everything gets unbelievably boring. Who knew a car window would teach me that lesson? Trailing my eyes lazily over the book on my lap, I deliberate. I could read, but that would mean turning on the overhead light, and I don't want what's out there to see me any better than it already does. Besides, reading in the back seat makes me nauseous. Sighing, I look out the window again. Dark skies press down on the trees, lining either side of the road, their jagged silhouettes barely visible beneath the moonlight. But I don't need to see them to know it is there. I can feel it, like the fabric of my clothes against my skin, like the weight of my own breath in my lungs. It's waiting, watching. It won't be able to follow us past the state line, not when it's tied by its grave deep in the very forest it now lurks in. If we can just keep moving, if we don't stop, my fingers tighten around the seatbelt, because in the trunk, wrapped in tarps, are knives. The blood on them should be drying, crusting over. But that doesn't matter. It won't be the knives that get us caught. It'll be it. The road stretches endlessly, twin lines of paint vanishing into the dark. The wipers squeak against the windshield, streaking rainwater instead of clearing it. The radio hums static beneath the commercials, like an unspoken warning. To whom, though? You see it? Bex asks beside me. Out of the four of us, she's freaking out the worst. I've long since put a barrier between our seats to avoid the worst of her rocking and jittery libs. I give her another flat look, hoping this one will shut her up for the rest of our trip. If I did, don't you think I would have said something by now? She whimpers and turns back to her own window, staring wide-eyed at the trees. I meet Rick's eyes in the rearview mirror, and Theo side-eyes me from the passenger seat. None of us say a word. In truth, I can see it. The shifting shadow that vaults across the street every few feet before melting into the trees. It got so out of hand. It was never. No, we did mean to do it. We just didn't think it'd come back to bite us like it did. Is doing. What's also true is that Bex will not be making it past the state limits with us. She can't be trusted. The minute everything was done and buried, she broke. Broken things aren't always fixable, and she is one loose end we cannot risk letting go, or it would end. We were all screwed. Rick blinks twice. I inhale deeply, sighing quietly through my nose. This is part of the plan. It won't chase us past the state limits, because it can't. But it also will have no incentive to do so. It's why we let Bex do it in the first place. Theo hums and raises the volume on the radio. Commercials, figures. Rick blinks one more time. The locks click, lightning flashes, bleaching Bex's side of the car in stark white. She yelps, flinching away from the window. I take my chance, sliding closer and pulling her into an embrace. It'll be okay, I whisper into her hair. Bex clutches at me, desperate. I let her. Everyone deserves comfort in the end. I swallow down my goodbyes. Theo coughs. I kick at his seat. Shut it, my hit says. The timing needs to be right. A shift in the trees. Closer now. The weight of something pressing against the night. Watching. Expectant. Do you hear that? Bex whispers, voice barely there. Like scraping. I don't answer. Because she doesn't hear scraping. She hears breathing. Shh. Nothing's there. You are just hearing things. I finally say, petting her hair. She doesn't feel me slide her seatbelt off or reach for the door handle. The door pops open. Mila, she whispers. Wait. Her fingers dig into my collar. She feels it now. The open air behind her. Too late. I pry her hands off me, using the impulse to send her flying out of the car. Sorry. I squeeze her one last time to make the hard push I give her. Bex screams. Her arms flail, desperate. For the door, for me, for anything. Her fingers catch on the seatbelt. All in vain. She tumbles, hitting the pavement in a mess of limbs. I should look away, but I don't. It roars. I turn just in time to see it pounce on the prone body on the road through the rear window. Rick finally breathes a sigh of relief, and seeing him do so uncoils the tight knot of tension between my shoulders. Theo closes his eyes and smiles, whistling along with the song playing. The car feels bigger now, quieter. I roll my shoulders, adjusting to the absence. Something lingers in the air, something final, or perhaps something new. 4 down to 3, a new dynamic. Interesting. It's a shame, but change is necessary sometimes, and there is no better time than right now. Isn't that the saying? I unbuckle my seat belt and close the car door. Smooth, careful. I lean between the front seats, smirking at Theo. He rolls his eyes, shaking his head fondly. I kiss Rick on the cheek, breathing in his cologne. He reaches up to stroke my cheek, takes his eyes off the road, long enough to kiss the corner of my mouth. Not a word, he murmurs, to our grave. I grin. It roars behind us. Bex doesn't. We cross the state limits. I sit back. The rain races down my window enthusiastically. Would you look at that? I win again. Just 2 more hours to get home. Unexpected turbulence. I catch myself staring into the bright blue space of nothingness as I instinctively prepare another cup of tea. Balancing myself with a wide stance, the tea swoops up around the cup, teasing a spill, as I manage to place it down for the woman in 12D. Her legs stretch out in front of her as she makes the most of the emergency exit row. I move down the next few rows, filling plastic cups with water and stale coffee. My mind is once again invaded with their final words to me. You're just asking for it, now being another glorified air waitress. What are you doing tonight, Soph? Krista asks, rearranging her white blouse and smoothing down her skirt as I start packing down the drinks cart. Just the usual, I guess. Wow, look at you spicing things up, she mocks, adjusting the pink scarf around her neck with perfectly manicured hands. The usual means I will be performing the same overnight trip routine of gym, jog around the city, order in cheap hotel food, and read a book. I once defied my better judgment and went out with Krista, but ended up having a panic attack in the bathroom. One of the guys at the bar had slipped an arm around my waist, and the touch of a stranger set off every warning sign in my body. I opted to get the next round of margaritas after pulling myself together, and my head didn't hit the hotel pillow until 3 a.m., before my alarm woke me up an hour later. The sunlight at this altitude is unforgiving on hungover eyes. So who are you planning on staying up with all night? I tease. Okay, so you remember how I told you about Matt? I hardly remember any of her friends' names, but I nod anyway. So he's in town and has invited over a couple of his friends from work. We are going to start at Gin Palace. You remember that cute place, right? Hidden door in the alleyway, a few lanes down from the hotel. Bookcases on the wall, house music, and those huge wine glasses I like, but with all different types of fancy gin and tonics. With my back to her, as I stow away the trolley, I realize she's waiting for my confirmation. Oh yeah, I remember. Nice place. Unbothered by my obvious lack of interest. She continues. Anyway, we are starting there, and then we're trying a new spot nearby. Apparently, one of his friends knows a club that is all completely glow in the dark, and she's cut off by the sound of the seatbelt light turning on as the captain announces we are likely to experience turbulence. Our cabin manager signals us to make our way down the aisle to ensure everyone follows the instructions, stopping to help a mother of 2 buckle up her sticky-looking toddlers. I think about Krista and how she is so open to new experiences and people. I can already imagine how her night is going to go. She will greet her friends with a big smile, and they'll cheers to having a fun night ahead. They'll share laughs, gossip, travel experiences, and talk like they've known each other for years. She has that effect on people, myself included. A commotion seems to be happening down the back of the plane, but it doesn't sound unusual. It's probably another disgruntled passenger complaining about being restrained by the seatbelt sign. Sounds like another safety rebellion happening. I joke quietly as I meet Krista in the center of the cabin. Actually, it's some fancy businessman with an accent complaining he was assigned the wrong seat. She rolls her eyes. I think he's European, but not the sexy, swoony kind. My stomach drops from the mention of an accented businessman. I swallow the wave of anxiety and force a sarcastic smile. If only more swoony European tourists came here for holidays, hey? Well, I wouldn't be hanging out with Matt and his friends tonight. I'll tell you that. She quips. We're about 30 minutes from touchdown and about to prepare the cabin for landing. It has been a relatively easy flight. Everyone in my section seems content, and the disgruntled man appears to have quietened down. Our cabin manager approaches Krista and I. She asks us to continue scanning the rows further down while she checks in with the captain. The turbulence is almost unnoticeable as I walk toward the back of the plane, but I sense a few nervous flyers and reassure them it's okay. We're not far from our destination. Then I see him sitting in the aisle seat, second row from the back. Cold gray eyes stare right through me. His mouth curls into a tight, malicious grin. A sudden drop of the aircraft challenges my balance, and I grab onto the nearest headrest to steady myself. Apologizing to no one in particular, I turn around in disbelief. Looking over my shoulder, I check if it's just a cruel trick of my subconscious. The seat is empty. Terror begins to smother my body, and I feel my hands tremble. His face has haunted me before. I've seen him in train stations, in busy restaurants, and on crowded flights like today. I'm almost used to his memory penetrating my reality. I remind myself again that it won't be real, and my mind is playing tricks. A few confused faces bring me back, and I straighten up before retreating to the front of the plane, pulling the curtain across behind me. I start to feel my throat close up. It's not real. He's not here. I was just imagining it. My hand is gripping my chest, as if to stop my heart from bursting out of me. The lavatory door is opened, then locked on the other side of the thin material, separating the passengers, oblivious to my silent distress. Calming my breaths to a steadier rhythm, I squeeze my elbows onto the small bench space in front of me and let my head fall into my hands. I sense I am no longer alone. The uniform suits you. Now I'm hearing things. My insides turn, and I feel vomit fighting its way up. You don't have to be shy. I know it's been a while. His words are thick with Syra, and an accent I haven't heard in over a year. My nose twitches as his cologne inches closer, infiltrating my airways with unbearable familiarity. Definitely real. I've missed you, he says casually, as if we are two old friends. I desperately will for Krista, or another attendant to interrupt the reunion, but I remain compromised. He's dangerous. I know this. A plane full of bystanders and a small crew of staff. What is he willing to risk? Before I am able to answer my own thoughts, I feel a cool touch to my lower back, and I stiffen. The hairs on my neck snap out like razor blades, and my blood turns to ice. Why won't you look at me, my dear? As his hand slides further up my back, I'm screaming for help, but no sound is leaving my mouth. I'm launching my knee into his ribs, but my legs are stuck in place. I'm reaching for the intercom, but my hands are locked together on my chest. A jolt knocks us both off our balance, and I'm able to swing out of his touch, only to find us face to face. He's shorter than I remember. Silver flecks scatter the sides of his thinning hair. He's even uglier than I remember. Sir, you can't be back here. Krista drifts past the curtain and pauses in between us. Get back to your seat now, please. Of course, my dear. Pausing to smirk before he exits. Are you okay? You look like you've just seen a dead body. Krista's face is filled with concern. I bite my tongue before responding with, I wish I had, and let her know I'm fine, just a little shaken from the bumpy ride. Oh, really? I can hardly feel a thing. She moves over to the CID's system and sets the lavatory lights to red. We'll be descending soon. I straighten up my blouse and pat under my eyes to make sure any signs of horror are blurred into my smooth, professional mask. So did Mr. Fancy Pants think he'd find his seat up here? What? I can hardly hear her over the ringing in my eardrums. The European guy with the accent. Was he pestering you about his seat? Oh, I force an eye roll. He just came too far, up looking for the bathroom. Well, you'd think he's a regular flyer with that attitude. Wouldn't he know where the lavatories are on these planes by now? I shrug and move past her, pretending to be busy conducting final checks on the food and beverage lockers. Krista announces the instructions for our descent across the cabin intercom, then turns to me. I'm just going to do a final rubbish collection and seat check. You want to just wait here? You look a little pale. Yeah, if you don't mind. Thanks. I move to open up the jump seat and begin to strap myself in. Damn, I mutter. I forgot to pull back the curtain. My hands are still shaky from the monster behind it. I begin to release the seat belt and stand up, taking a deep breath in before I reach up for a handful of fabric. But a hand grabs mine first. My weight is suddenly whipped out from underneath me, and I'm falling. A wicked crack erupts from behind my ears. I can feel something warm and wet trickle down my back. You thought you could run away, and I would forget about you? He's hovering over me. Did anyone hear me fall? Bringing his slimy fingers to my face. He strokes my cheek. Paralyzed. I'm trying to run in a bad dream, but my legs won't move faster than a walk. I'm being chased, but my body has no sense of urgency. My mind is fighting to control a faulty vessel. His hand on my thigh makes me feel 18. Oh my God! I hear someone shriek. She fell. I was just checking on her. Sophie, are you okay? What happened? Krista bends down next to him, and I struggle to focus on which one of her swirling faces is real. I want to tell her to call for an emergency, but I can't seem to gather the words. She's an old friend. I can keep an eye on her if you get a first aid kit, he says, maintaining his cool composure next to me. Looking directly at him, she says, Sir, you need to leave right now. Before she can say more, he thrusts his hand around her throat, and she is backed against the jump seat I was sitting on just a minute before. Awful screeches escape from her mouth as the veins grow by her temples. Her eyes search desperately. Watching my friend struggle for her life suddenly releases all the tightly wound ropes, holding me anchored to the floor. My hand reaches for the nearest cupboard, and a coffee pot extends from my arm and cracks down on his skull. I hit him again and again and again. Soph, she croaks. Sophie, Krista pleads, struggling to pull herself up from the ground. He is silent, snapping back to my sense of self. I realize what I've done. The coffee pot drops from my hand, and a few wet drops slide off my face with it. We need a doctor. Is anyone a doctor? I yell, and hear the gasps echo down the aircraft. I was fresh out of high school and approaching my move-out date, assigned by my parents when I started working. It was said to be the best restaurant in town. We had regular guests from all over the world who stayed in the hotel above. I didn't notice it at first, how I was always rostered on the section of mostly dinner for once. I received generous tips and learned about the different places they were all from. I enjoyed being praised for my efforts and attentiveness during the meal. The mostly male and outspoken staff generally left me alone, which suited me just fine. Though occasionally they'd comment on my appearance, telling me I needed more makeup if I had tired eyes or to put on a smile when I was clearing tables. The manager would joke about my tight ass and even grabbed it once to check the merchandise in front of the kitchen crew. Mr. Ackerman would arrive every night at 5 p.m. and order a glass of Syrah when he was in town. He'd sink into the couch at the bar and chat to the staff about life in Europe and his work in the oil business. I caught his eyes scanning my movements a few times, but we didn't speak until I was placing the napkin at his table and asking, "The usual again, sir? Make sure you take good care of him." I was frequently reminded by my manager, Colin, at the mandatory Christmas work party. We had dinner at a local pub, and Colin insisted we joined him for drinks after. Once a girl refused these nights out drinking, and she shortly had her hours cut and tips reduced until she had no choice but to quit. At the bar, we ran into some of our regulars. Mr. Ackerman seemed pleased to see us and eyed my black dress thoroughly before delivering a sharp wink. "You should go chat with him. Keep up the good service, you know," my manager instructed with a pat on the ass, a glass of wine in hand. Courtesy of the man next to me, I sat there, struggling to answer the questions over the blasting music. I noticed how misplaced Mr. Ackerman was in his business casual attire, surrounded by partying patrons, 10 or 20 years his junior. "Sorry, I didn't hear you." I leaned into his side ever so slightly, struggling to keep any distance between us. His hand slid around my thigh in response. "I'll miss seeing you when I go back home." "I'm sure you'll be fine." There were flowers in my locker the following week, and a note saying he looked forward to seeing me again. I tried talking to Colin about how it made me uncomfortable and thought it was unprofessional. "Sophie, this is professional. You're making connections and bringing in regular money. Keep up the excellent work." He checked in a month later and greeted me with 3 kisses on the cheek during a busy service. I wanted to run. I wanted to wash his touch off in a scorching shower. Instead, I smiled and continued serving overpriced glasses of champagne. Then came dinner. Colin called me before my shift, asking me to wear the same black dress from the Christmas party. "It's a formal kind of occasion tonight. We need to be on an extra level." Too afraid to disobey, I reluctantly arrived with black kitten heels to match, only to find I was to be served that night instead of serving. Promised my pay as usual, plus a tip from the foreign businessman, I followed orders. We sat at the candlelit table and discussed his travels and work in the private dining room. I actively avoided any conversation directed back to me. A package with a silver bow was placed between us when the plates were cleared. "For you, my dear." I carefully unwrapped it to find an expensive-looking perfume. Only the best for my favorite girl. I don't know what to say. Forcing a smile, which ached my entire face. "Say nothing," he whispered, pulling my hand toward him before placing his lips on my skin. I resisted every urge to whip it away and smack his jaw, but I felt another pair of eyes on me. I glanced over to the room door to find my manager peering in. nodding in approval. Everyone knew. They all played a part in it. They helped print letters, deliver flowers, and even gave him my phone number. I was a pawn in their game. Mr. Ackerman must have offered more money than I could have imagined to the entire hotel staff. What other motive did they have? Or was it just a funny joke to them? What followed in the months after will stay with me for the rest of my life. I eventually cracked the morning after being requested to join Mr. Ackerman in his room for the night. I burst through the lobby and headed straight to the manager's office. I'd saved enough of my generous tips to book a flight to the other side of the world with an approved visa and an interview with an airline. I could finally escape. Colin laughed in disbelief of my resignation and career change. You're just asking for it, now being another glorified air waitress. I dropped my apron on his desk and left without another word, going over the interaction in my head, making sure I didn't let it slip where the airline was based. The thud of the wheels touching down sends excruciating pain up my scalp as I continue applying pressure to my wound. Krista is sitting opposite me with her face slowly returning to color, squeezing my hand. The emergency services are waiting at the gate, and I brace myself for the chaos about to erupt when we open the doors. I don't know what is going to happen. All I know is that my chest feels lighter, and I can breathe again. I've said too much. I noticed him the first time at the coffee shop on 3rd Street. He sat 2 tables over, stirring a cup of tea he never drank. He wasn't looking at me, not directly, but there was something in the way his head tilted, the way his eyes flickered over the rim of his cup, that made me feel observed. Every so often, he would blow on his mug, and eventually, this act became unsettling, as I knew the tea must have grown cold in the hour he sat unmoving. This man was dressed neatly, a stark contrast to myself, in a worn sweatshirt and messy bun that couldn't contain my red hair. He wore an ironed shirt, pressed pants, and his copper hair was immaculately combed and styled. He was remarkable because he simply did not belong. A bustling place with people moving in and out as he sat stoically with his tea. The second time was at the bookstore downtown. I was running my fingers along the shelves, searching for something to pull me in. Recently, I've been drawn to the paranormal and had moved into horror. It was terrifying, yet intriguing, as I began to imagine all there is out there that is unknown. As I perused the back of the latest Awad novel, I saw him standing in the philosophy aisle to my right. He wasn't reading, just tracing the spine of a book with one long finger. When I walked past, he looked up. "Not your usual genre," he said, nodding toward the horror novel in my hands. I frowned. "Excuse me?" He tilted his head. "You usually read literary fiction, something with layered metaphors, quiet heartbreak." A shiver danced down my spine. How would you know that? He didn't answer. Instead, he closed the book he had been holding and walked away, disappearing behind the towering shelves before I could press further. As I followed him, his pace quickened, dressed in seemingly the exact same clothes as days before, with a steady, strong step. I could not place him, though it felt like I knew him from somewhere. In my haste, without noticing, I had run into a display. As the books scattered to the floor, I muttered apologies to the staff member who ran over. I quickly looked up, and he was gone. By the third time, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I was at the park, spring in the air, though Lake Michigan was still hedged in ice dunes, which rose and fell in the evening light, my breath curling in front of me in soft clouds. He was sitting on a bench, his posture relaxed, hands resting in his lap. Unlike before, he didn't pretend not to notice me. I noticed he wore a scarf. A scarf, I swear, was my own. I had lost it many years ago, in grade school, and was scolded for my carelessness. It couldn't be, I thought, as I approached closer. His gaze lifted as I approached, as if he had been waiting. "You always take this route home." I stopped in my tracks. "What?" He smiled, but it wasn't a casual, friendly expression. It was something else, something knowing. The same path, every evening. "You like the way the light hits the water at this hour." My pulse quickened. "Are you following me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured to the lake. There's something peaceful about watching things move where they aren't meant to be. The way ripples distort reflections. Everything familiar becomes something else. I crossed my arms. "That doesn't answer my question." He exhaled, running a hand through his auburn hair. "No, I suppose it doesn't." My skin prickled. "Who are you?" For a moment, I thought he might tell me. He parted his lips, as if considering it. His gaze locked onto mine with an intensity that sent a strange, twisting sensation through my stomach. But then, just as quickly, something shifted. His face, his expression. It was like watching a shadow pass over the sun. "I've said too much," he murmured, more to himself than to me. He stood, brushing invisible dust from his coat. "Forget this conversation." My heart pounded. "Forget it?" He nodded, his voice quiet. "It's better that way." And then he turned, walking away with an unsettling hum. I wanted to call out, to demand answers, but my throat tightened. I could only watch as he disappeared into the trees on the shoreline, his silhouette dissolving in the twilight. It wasn't until I turned back toward the path, heart hammering, that I realized something strange. There were no footprints where he had been standing, and the air where he had spoken still carried the scent of something I couldn't quite name. Something like old paper, burnt cedar, and a storm about to break. I don't remember deciding to come here. One moment, I was standing in the park. The next, the ice stretched before me, endless and waiting. I had begun to question whether I was losing my grip on reality. The strange man's cryptic words, the shifting moments in time, and the absence of solid ground beneath my feet had all led me to this moment, standing on the frozen shore of Lake Michigan. The ice cracked beneath my boots, protesting against the weight of yet another cold season. The lake stretched out before me, an endless horizon of white and blue that should have felt serene, but instead left me with an unsettling feeling, like something was wrong, something lurking just out of sight. I walked carefully, mindful of the shifting terrain beneath me. The lake was beautiful, but treacherous. Mounds of frozen sand rose in strange, wind-carved shapes, dusted with snow. The ice here was patchy, some parts solid, some beginning to crack and leak dark pools of water beneath. There was something about this place that made my stomach turn, something about the way the lake seemed to pulse under my feet. It felt alive, watching me, waiting. The icy wind bit at my skin, and my breath curled in the air in front of me in wisps of smoke. I knelt by a pool of dark water that had opened beneath the ice, watching as minnows darted below, their silver bodies flashing like tiny ghosts in the clear, cold depths. The clarity of the water made my pulse quicken. Too easy to see the darkness below. Too easy to imagine the lake's cold hunger. Then, something caught my eye, a darker patch of ice than the others. An odd shape trapped beneath the surface. I moved closer, my boots skidding slightly on the slick ground. The ice here was different, smoother, clearer, almost like glass. And underneath it, something unnatural, a smear of color, a reddish-orange streak that seemed impossibly bright against the deep blue-black of the water. My heart lurched. I knelt down, tapping gently at the ice with the toe of my boot, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The shape underneath wavered, but it didn't move. I pressed harder, cracking the ice, and then, as though the surface were giving up its secret, the water pooled, revealing what had been hidden beneath. Hair, long and dark, flowing like seaweed with the current. A face, pale and lifeless, staring upward, eyes wide and empty. My breath caught. A sharp, cold terror raced through my veins. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest, but I couldn't look away. The wind howled, and the ice beneath me groaned, shifting uneasily. And then realization struck like a physical blow. The woman under the ice, frozen, lifeless, was me. A strangled sound left my throat. My mind recoiled, trying to reject what I was seeing. But there was no denying it. It was my own face staring back at me, my own vacant, sightless eyes, trapped beneath the ice. A whisper cut through the howling wind. "Do you understand now?" I turned sharply. The man was there, standing just a few feet behind me, as if he had always been. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes, an ancient sorrow, a knowing, made my stomach churn. "You weren't meant to find this," he said quietly, his gaze flickering to the ice, to the frozen image of me. I shook my head, my pulse pounding in my ears. "What is this? Why is she? Why am I?" "You've been lost," he said softly. "Lost in time, lost in memory. The past and future bleed together. You are the woman under the ice, and yet you're still here, trying to find your way." A deep, pulsing ache settled in my chest. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. I wanted to reject his words, to turn and run, but something about them rang true in a way I couldn't explain. I opened my mouth to speak, but something flickered in my peripheral vision. Movement in the ice. I turned sharply, expecting to see the body beneath me shift. But what I saw instead made my blood run cold. Reflections. Not just one, but many, scattered across the ice in broken, distorted fragments. My face, but not as it was now. Older, younger, crying, laughing, standing somewhere else entirely, flickering like a glitch in time. 100 versions of me trapped beneath the surface, shifting and blending like ripples in the water. One version of me didn't flicker and vanish like the others. She was staring back, her mouth moving soundlessly, like she was trying to warn me. My hands trembled. "This isn't real," the man sighed, as if he had been expecting this reaction. "What is real?" he murmured. "Is time so linear, Alex? Can you really be sure you're still the same person you think you are? Or have you already crossed over?" My pulse slammed against my ribs. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong. But something inside me knew he wasn't. The lake groaned beneath me, the ice fracturing in slow, creeping lines. The world tilted, unsteady, and for a moment, I felt as though I was slipping between the cracks, the space between past and future collapsing around me. I turned back to the man, searching his face for some kind of anchor, some kind of answer. "What do I do?" I whispered. His eyes were solemn, unwavering. "You come with me. There's only one way to move forward." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. I hesitated, my gaze flickering once more to the frozen version of myself beneath the ice. A life lost, a path already taken. But if I stepped away, if I turned back now, would I ever get another chance to change it? I swallowed hard. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. And then I nodded. The man held out his hand, and I took it. The mannequin in the lake. Johnny and Sally didn't believe me when I told them the mannequin in the water had saved me from drowning. Well, something had pulled me down, and I suspected it had been her, but I didn't mention that part to my friends. Instead, I pointed to the exact spot where I believed she'd pulled me up from the rough Lake Michigan water. They laughed out loud. It's true. Her arms swayed forward and back. I swear. I motioned with my arms the same way the mannequin had done so. The marshmallow that was supposed to be for my s'more slipped out of my fingers. Sand covered my piece. For God's sake, I'd been looking forward to making them with my buddy and his girl. Sally guffawed. You're so stupid, you know that? Plus, if you would have gotten more practice in class, you wouldn't have almost drowned. Maybe I shouldn't be here with your stupid asses, I said, glowering at Johnny, who'd had the bright idea of skipping school. Just because he'd said, but I knew why. Because of her. Johnny had skipped school so many times that the teachers probably didn't even care to find out where he was. Me, though, this was only my second time. The first time was just a few days ago, the day the mannequin had saved me. I hurled the marshmallow into the water and watched as it floated away. But when the tip of a mannequin's fingers sprang out of the water and took my piece in, a shiver ran down from the top of my head to the end of my toes. Did you guys see that? Bro! Here. Johnny split his s'more in half. The gooey center stretching like fresh out of the deep fryer mozzarella sticks. My buddy Johnny and I had been friends for 4 years now. Since first grade. My only friend. All the other kids sided with him always. But when I tried talking to them, they'd ignore me. Yes, I longed for more friends. And yes, I felt a little jealous of Johnny's charisma. But I knew I was lucky to have Johnny in my life. My only friend. I helped him with his schoolwork, and he got me out of trouble. Always took the blame, no matter what shenanigans we got into. And this time was no exception. He had a fake doctor's note ready for us. And if the teachers and parents found out it was fake, he'd say he'd planned it all. Sally, though, we'd just met her this year in 5th grade. The moment I laid eyes on her, my heart pounded so hard, I thought it would burst out of my chest. Little hearts formed around her head, just like in the cartoons. But just as quick as I'd fallen for her, she took a liking to Johnny, and they hit it off. And she often rolled her eyes at me. At the end of the pier that was yards and yards away, water splashed. I squinted to get a good look. Figured something had been thrown into the water and washed ashore. for it was usually like that. Guests came to the lake, swam, held parties. Music blasted at full volume, and instead of taking care of the lake that provided them with the best Saturday and Sunday parties and cookouts, they littered the water and the sand. Even the junkies left their pills, and needles scattered their poison, which became a scavenger hunt for the other junkies and beach cleanup crew. I took a few steps away from Johnny and Sally, then turned to tell them I'd be back, that I wanted to see what was at the pier. But Johnny and Sally began to make out. They kissed, as fake as the telenovela actors my mother watched every evening from 6 to 9, and she ignored me those 3 hours. In fact, I was on my own most of the time, whether she was home or not. She either worked, watched TV, or locked herself in her bedroom. When I arrived at the pier, I made my way under the boardwalk. The clouds that had gathered darkened the underpier, but I could still make out the figures that stood still. It was like they'd met for a secret meeting, and I'd just discovered them. "Hi," my voice said, struggling to get that one word out. Not one of them minded me, but I could hear their whispers. I inched closer. Their whispers stopped. At the end of the underpier, where the water and sand met, there she was, my mannequin, my savior. I went to her, avoiding the still figures. But as I neared them, a harsh gust of wind pushed me down to the sand, close to them. "Push," I heard them whisper. "Water," they continued. My breathing increased at the thought of these lifeless models somehow communicating. I looked up at them. The figures had their heads turned to me. How? I had no clue. They had no eyes, no mouths. In fact, there was nothing on them but the head, arms, legs, and torso that made them up. Naked, motionless. And though they weren't looking at me directly, their gaze was fixed on me. I pushed myself up and walked backward, away from them, away to the light past the underpier. But before my body touched the light, one of them blocked me. It was her. I knew it. There was a connection between us. I turned to her. The arm that had stopped me remained up in the air. "Bring," they said. And I turned to them. No realizing when, she pushed me, and again, I was down. Sand kicked in my face. No idea which of them had done it, because when I looked up, they remained still. Now, they were closer. How many were they? 9, perhaps. 10, if you counted her behind me. Where was Johnny? Sally? Still making out? Friend? Forever. Us? Never leave. They had a cultish demeanor about them. When they spoke, it was chant-like, but like they were speaking to me. "Water?" she said behind me. "Lake." "What? You want me to go into the water?" "Us. Forever. friend? Were they recruiting me? I can't, I cried. The sand that covered my hand scratched my eyes. My mom, she'll get worried. My friends, they'll come looking for me soon. She hate, one of them whispered. Who? My mom. Sally? He lost. Another one said, Johnny. Had I lost my friend to her? We friends, the one behind me, tugged at my shirt. Her hand already pointed at the water. I turned to my friends. For a moment, it looked like Johnny had noticed me and locked eyes with me. Then, Sally turned his face away to hers. Whether she hated me or disliked me, what was true was that she didn't consider me her friend. She was all about Johnny. I turned to the mannequins under the pier. There were 8 now, plus she, who had saved me, still behind me. The one missing was now in the lake, its torso above the water, its arms extended, ready to receive me. Friends forever, I whispered, foreboding. It was all too much, really. The woman and the boy dragged their tired legs through the deep snow. Ahead of them, far off in the distance, lay the undulating, snow-covered hills where the log cabin they were heading for had been built many years previously. The two could picture in their minds a blazing fire and hot chocolate with little marshmallows floating on the surface, and it was this that kept them going. The boy, a young teenager, often had to support the woman and help her across fallen trees that hampered their progress. The woman was exhausted, and every few minutes she stopped, leaning heavily over her knees, trying desperately to catch her breath. The boy stopped with her every time, but his eyes kept traveling anxiously across the vast expanse of land they had to cross to reach their goal. Being younger and fitter, he didn't need as many breaks as the woman did, but he never complained. It was more important for him to bring the woman back alive than to force her to walk faster. They set off again, the woman hanging on to the boy's arm. The surface underneath them suddenly turned slippery. They had reached the frozen lake finally. There was still a long way to go, but at least there were no hills or fallen trees to navigate. The woman stopped again. Her breathing was labored, and she had trouble drawing a deep enough breath to regain some strength. She was crying from the exhaustion. The boy knelt down and held her. His face was worried and concerned. His hands shook somewhat as he gently patted the woman's back. A man walked past in a sideways manner, like a crab. He waved at the pair and smiled. The woman stretched out a hand towards the man, imploringly, and the boy gave him a surly look. But the man just smiled again and continued through the deep snow. He wore only one snowshoe, which explained his strange gait, but it didn't seem to hamper his progress. He flattened the snow with his snowshoe-clad foot and hardly sunk through the snow at all with the other foot. The woman looked at the flattened snow and then looked up at the boy. He smiled at her. At least there would now be an easier path for them to use. The woman straightened up and, sensing renewed vigor, pulled the boy to his feet. They hugged, took each other's hand, and started walking again. Ahead of them, the man continued his crab walk, humming a monotonous tune that sounded more like a low rumble than anything else. He turned his head, saw them walking behind him, and motioned for them to follow, nodding his head encouragingly. As the man forged ahead in front of them, the distance between them and him grew. The man was walking unnaturally fast, considering the conditions and his unconventional gait, and the boy grew anxious. He tried to walk faster to keep up, and the distance between him and the woman increased unrelentingly. She called his name, but he seemed oblivious. He had his eyes firmly on the man, who was now barely visible far ahead of them, and did not stop when the woman needed a break again. She called him feebly, but she had no strength to raise her voice. She cried again, cursing her tired legs and laboring lungs. Once more, she bent over her knees, trying to catch her breath. She wanted to scream. She wanted to beg the boy to wait, but no words could be heard. A flutter on the wind, a change in the vibrations another human being causes when they disturb the airflow, caused her to look up. The boy was no longer visible from her vantage point, bent double over her knees. She straightened up quickly, her heart beating faster. Where was the boy? Squinting to look in front of her, she suddenly saw his head pop up, arms flailing, and then disappear again. Her heart fell into her stomach. He had gone through the ice. Finding a strength she didn't know she had, the woman ran. The snow was deep and felt like syrup. She screamed in frustration and then called the boy's name. As she got closer, she slowed down, walking fast but carefully towards the boy. He was bobbing up and down again, waving his arms, but he made no sound. The cold water had robbed him of his voice, and his open mouth, so poignant in his horrified face, only mimicked the sound he was trying to make. Suddenly, he disappeared again, and only his hand was sticking up over the snow. The woman, no longer trying to be cautious, threw herself down on the ice and found his hand. Seconds before, it would have disappeared under the water. She felt the boy grabbing the hand, and she pulled, the adrenaline and fear giving her more strength than she had ever had before. The boy's head appeared again. He looked straight at the woman, and there was a panic in his eyes that scared her more than anything else. She noticed that there wasn't much room for his head, and with a jolt of fear, she realized the fissure in the ice was closing up, and fast. The boy's head disappeared under the water again, despite her holding on to his hand, and the hole kept closing. Now, there was no way the boy could get his head through the hole to draw breath again, and she screamed in fear and panic. With her free hand, she started pounding on the ice around the hole. The ice was too hard, and her frail beating could not even chip away at the surface. Keeping a firm hold on the hand that still gripped hers convulsively, she tried bashing a hole in the ice with the heel of one boot, but the ice would not even crack. The boy's hand started losing its grip on her hand, and she wailed in desperation, stomping harder on the ice, standing up to add weight to the pounding on the ice. She lost her grip on the boy's hand, and it slipped below the water, the hole finally closing inexorably around it with a sucking sound far away from the location in her dream. The woman woke up sobbing, sweat moistening her forehead, and shaking from head to toe. A pain in her chest so intense it brought tears to her eyes. The woman tried taking a deep breath. She was moaning, and her heart was beating so rapidly it hurt. Next to her, her husband was snoring loudly, completely oblivious to her plight. This was nothing new. It would more than likely take an earthquake to wake him up at this hour, and she didn't need him anyway. She gently pushed the blankets aside and slipped out of bed. She had to make sure he was safe. The dream had been so vivid, so real. Tiptoeing across the hall, shivering slightly in the cold night air that permeated the house, she arrived in her older son's bedroom. A soft snoring could be heard from the room. As she neared, a quiet meow greeted her. Looking into the room, the lamp-like eyes of their cat Brandy were staring back at her, and the animal meowed quietly again. Letting her breath out, she hadn't even been aware of holding it. She tiptoed over to stroke the cat gently. "Good girl, you stay with him. Keep him safe for me." Looking down upon her teenage son, his mouth open and his wavy hair in disarray around his peaceful face, she felt her throat constrict slightly, and she had to swallow hard to stifle the moan that had almost escaped her mouth again. The dream was still so alive in her mind, and the sense of foreboding was making her eyes water, her chest aching so much she was afraid it would burst open. Wanting desperately to wake him up just to hold him, she instead stretched her hand out, stroking her son's forehead gently before retreating out into the hall again. Feeling compelled to check on her younger son as well, she continued down the hall to the third bedroom. He was sleeping on top of his covers, his little thumb securely lodged in his mouth. She could tell he was cold as he was curled up in a fetal position, and she carefully tugged the blanket out from under him, covering his little body and tucking it in around the sides of the bed. There was no point in going back to bed now. She was wide awake, and in less than an hour and a half, she would have to be up to help the kids get ready for school. She tiptoed past her husband, still in his bed, snoring loudly, to grab her bathrobe, and then snuck downstairs to make a cup of tea. Sunlight was forcing its way into her kitchen when she arrived back downstairs, penetrating dusty corners and pushing through a curtain of tiny dust particles that had been stirred up as she grabbed a tea towel to wipe the cup. And she sat down at the kitchen table, carefully sipping a steaming cup of Earl Grey. She still felt cold inside, shivering slightly, even as the warm liquid made its way to her empty stomach. The image of her son's head disappearing under the ice in her dream, still so clear in her mind. It was making her shake her head repeatedly, as if to rid herself of an annoying fly. She was wringing her hands, moaning quietly every time she saw the hand disappearing under the ice in her mind's eye. Would she ever be able to forget this dream? Little tiny clicks on the kitchen floor told her that Brandy had decided to join her in the kitchen. The cat looked up at the woman as she rounded the kitchen island on her way to her food bowl, but seemed entirely intent on wanting to satisfy her hunger for food before satisfying other needs, such as attention from her human owner. And she beat her regular path right over to her food bowl without stopping. The bowl was empty. Accusing feline eyes locked into hers. Brandy sat down, looked back at her bowl, and then up again at the woman. It was obvious that the cat was asking for food, but the woman, who was still feeling faint from her nightmare, seemed oblivious. A soft meow mingled with a purr escaped the tiny mouth as the cat stood back up again and sauntered over. Wrapping herself around the human legs, she began a relentless meowing until the woman finally surrendered and got up off her chair to feed the cat. That's when she saw it. Next to the canister where they kept the cat's food, there was a pile of unopened and unchecked mail from the day before. On the top, underneath a blue envelope, apparently sent out by Publishers Clearinghouse, she was probably about to win $5,000 a week for life, was something white. She realized that she was looking at a picture of snow, and with trepidation and horrific foreboding, she pulled the catalog out from under the envelope. It was a magazine on vacation cottages in northern Maine. Her husband had been canvassing for this vacation for months and had obviously ordered the catalog. And on the front was a picture of a rustic-looking cabin with snowdrifts lapping the windows. In the background, a frozen lake could be seen. The woman caught her breath and felt her knees buckle. Next to the cabin, locking eyes with her from the picture, stood the man from her dream, smiling benignly, holding his hand out towards the cottage. In his other hand, he was holding one snowshoe. Mercifully, darkness enveloped her, and she escaped. For a while. It was all too much, really. What she left behind. California, 1868. Clara Emerson pressed herself against the train window, her eyes glazed and alert from exhaustion. She stretched out her aching legs, revealing her muddy shoes that poked out from underneath the hem of her dress. She retracted her feet back from visibility, gathering and stroking her straw-like, graying hair as she peered out the window. Clara glanced to see if anyone was watching her. Only a handful of people sat behind her, none of which were looking in her direction. No, I'm safe. She drew in a deep breath, steadying herself. But unease coiled in her chest and churned in her belly. Turning in her seat, she lowered her gaze to the small diamond band on her finger. Sunlight caught in its facets, scattering tiny prisms across her skin. For just a moment, she marveled at its beauty. Clara looked up and locked eyes with a man several seats ahead, clean-shaven, with thin-framed spectacles perched on his nose. The man stared at her with a hollow, unreadable expression. Her pulse kicked. How long had he been watching her without her noticing? Her skin went pale and clammy, like a predator spotting easy prey. The man rose from his seat and approached her, not breaking eye contact once. Clara's stiffened in her seat as the man approached. "Go away. May I sit? I have a long journey ahead of me, and I could sure use the company," he said to her. "No." Of course, the man sat down across from her. His eyes remained on her, almost as if they were boring into her very soul. "Didn't anyone tell you it's rude to stare?" she asked him, hoping that illuminating his behavior would cause him to cease. But it did not. "Forgive me, ma'am. It's just, you look so familiar. Do we know each other, perhaps?" "No, I don't recall your face. You must be mistaken." "No, I think we do know each other." Why won't he quit? "Where are you from?" "I'm not going to tell you that. You haven't even told me who you are." "Ah, how foolish of me. My name is Simon Klein." He leaned forward, extending his hand to her. He sat back down and continued to stare at her, expectantly this time. Clara sighed, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "I'm Elaine. Elaine Whitmore. Elaine. I would have taken you for an Alice or Charlotte or Clara." Clara froze in her seat, her eyes wide and her palms sweaty. "Who is this man?" "No, I'm just Elaine." Mr. Klein gave her a wry smile, shaking his head. "So, where are you headed to?" Clara shrugged. "Anywhere that's far away from here." "Ah, come on. California's the place to be. There's opportunity here." "Not for me. Not anymore." "Shame," he said. "What is?" Mr. Klein chuckled. "Surely you have friends or family that will miss you. It almost sounds like you're running away." Now he was just getting on her nerves. You're quite brazen, Mr. Klein. My business is none of your concern. Mr. Klein pressed his lips tightly together, as if he were in pain, and forced out a smile. My apologies, Mrs. Whitmore. I never quite learned how to keep my nose out of others' affairs. I am a curious fellow, curious indeed. Hoping to break the tension, she pulled out a flask from underneath her shawl. Care for a drink? A wild glimmer in his eyes appeared. It was as if he wanted to reach out and strangle her. No, thank you, he said, his demeanor shifting. There was something dangerous underneath this man's calm exterior. Somehow, that made him more terrifying. If he were angry and violent from the start of their encounter, she could predict his next move and accept that she was under attack. But this man unnerved her to her core. There was something almost familiar about him. Gathering her shawl, she stood from her seat, and as steady as she could present herself to be, she faced him. I think I would prefer to be in my own company for the rest of the journey. Good day to you. Please, there's no need to leave. If you wish to be alone, I can accommodate. Mr. Klein stood, moving back to his original seat. Clara returned to hers, facing away from Mr. Klein this time. But she could still feel his eyes on her. She waited until the train had passed a dilapidated old shack close to the tracks before rising from her seat and creeping her way down toward the caboose. Her heart quickened, as did her pace. "Excuse me, sir," she heard behind her. Sucking in a breath, she chanced a glance behind her, locking eyes with Mr. Klein, who was trailing close behind her. He did not smile this time at her. His eyes were cold and focused on her intently, like before. But there was a rage in those eyes, a bloodlust, in fact. She didn't think twice this time, turning and running down the aisle like a mad woman. She stumbled through the empty train carts, praying an escape plan would present itself to her before he reached her. But there wasn't enough time, and there was nowhere left to run. I'm trapped. She looked out the back window and considered the tracks. Maybe she could jump. Maybe. She might still have a chance. The door behind Clara creaked open. She spun around to see Mr. Klein reaching into his coat pocket, revealing a silver pistol. She backed away slowly, keeping her eyes trained on Mr. Klein, if that even was his name, and she pressed herself against the back door of the caboose. He pointed the barrel at her. Rage oozed out from beneath the calm, collected persona he performed earlier. His hand trembled, but he remained in control of himself for the moment. Clara trembled, terrified of what he would do to her. "What do you want from me? Why are you following me?" "I saw you," Mr. Klein said. "I saw what you did to my sister that night." Whatever she planned on saying to him, the words fell empty in her mouth. This is it. It's over. What? You thought no one saw you sneak out of her house in the dead of night? And I find my sister dead in her home? No, that's a lie. I would never harm anyone. I'm a good woman. How do you sleep at night? He said, his finger twitchy on the trigger. I know it was you who did it. No sooner had I returned from my hunting trip, I see you sneaking out of her house like some rat. She was dead when I found her. Please, have mercy on me. I would never do such a thing. Liar. Mr. Klein drew closer. She fumbled for the handle behind her, desperate for escape. Her weight against the door caused it to swing open, landing her on her back. She held her hands over her head to shield herself. Why? He cried. Why did you do it? Tell me! A shrill, raspy whistle emanated from the front of the train, distracting Mr. Klein for the briefest moment. Clara seized the opportunity and kicked Mr. Klein in the shin, dropping him to his knees. He screamed, clutching his leg as the gun clattered next to him. Without a second thought, she scrambled for the pistol and swiped it, aiming the barrel at him. Get up, she said. Mr. Klein held his hands up, pushing himself up off the floor. I'm not the one that deserves this. I'm not going to die today. She pressed her finger to the trigger, but it wouldn't budge. The hammer. Mr. Klein grabbed hold of the barrel and yanked it back hard. Too hard. Clara released the pistol, and with it, Mr. Klein, screaming as he staggered backward, tumbling off the train. He hit the tracks hard, rolling like a rag doll, before coming to rest, bloodied and limp, his lifeless eyes fixed toward the sky. The wind violently whipped Clara's hair as Mr. Klein's body disappeared beyond view. She steadied herself against the railing, her thumb absent-mindedly tracing the curve of the diamond. Lost in a thought she refused to finish. The hunt never ends. You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? The note read. The man had shivered when he had read those ominous words, as perspiration began to drip down from his temple, the salty liquid seeping into his eyes and temporarily blinding him. This is the end, the man had said to himself in an agitated, trembling whisper as he looked down at the sheet of notepaper which had been left on his office desk. He glanced around at the other employees to see if anyone was looking his way, giving him some indication on who had left the message. But all of them were engaged in their own little world of toting up the facts and figures which were constantly coming through on their computer terminals. What had caused this man to turn deathly white and feel so nauseous? How had those 9 little words on the page that had now turned his world completely upside down come to cause him so much anguish and despair? That unhappy event had happened a week before. So let us now find out what had caused this man, Henry Miller, to end up in this now distressing location where he now found himself. At this moment, he was looking between the slats of a Venetian blind, observing the street outside, and trying as best as he could to remain unseen from the road in front of the building, where he now cringed, frightened out of his wits. How had it come to this? He thought. Last week, he didn't have a care in the world. All was going well at work. And then came that note, and he found himself involved in something that had instantly changed his life. And now he was on the run, constantly looking over his shoulder. And at this moment, hiding in this abandoned building, a structure that had a large sign outside stating that it was condemned and would shortly be torn down. So, how long could he remain here before he had to find another place of sanctuary? The year is 1948. The war is over. After 6 years of bloodshed and butchery by a psychopath and his evil, willing collaborators, during which an estimated 80 to 100 million people had died or been murdered. The Nuremberg trials had finished, and many, many hundreds of German Nazi war criminals had found justice on the end of a rope for crimes against humanity. Then, there were some who had decided that a cyanide pill was a much quicker way to escape the noose of retribution. Others, seeing that the end was near, had made their getaway before the Russians entered Berlin and tortured them, finding their way to South America, where many of them lived for a while, trying to evade the men from the Simon Wiesenthal organization, people dedicated to finding every last Nazi and bringing them to justice, headed by their leader, a man known as the Nazi Hunter, who was a Holocaust survivor. Even though many years have passed, the hunt still goes on, still finding those vile and depraved monsters, a subspecies of the human race. Although some are well into their dotage, justice is still being served. A particular case in point is the case of Adolf Eichmann, who, along with Heinrich Himmler, was the architect of the final solution, where 6 million Jews were sent to the death camps, only to be gassed, their bodies cremated, and the remains crushed. Eichmann was finally located in Argentina in 1961, thinking that after 16 years, he was safe. But justice caught up with him, and he met the Grim Reaper on the end of a rope a year later. But returning to Henry Miller, a man who had changed his name from Henrik Mengele and who had managed to escape from his home in Germany to live in Spain, a neutral country during the war, just after the conflict had begun. The surname he was born with, Mengele, was the same name as the man who was once revered by the Nazi Party for his inhumane and horrific experiments on unwilling participants. The infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, a man given the name of the Angel of Death, a man if indeed he could even be called that, who performed appalling and unspeakable experimentation on live inmates of the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Most of those subjects dying a lingering, painful, and agonizing death, all in the cause of making the so-called German master race into a nation of blue-eyed, blonde, Aryan supermen. But what had caused Henry to be reduced to his present situation? It was all due to that one barge letter that he had found on his desk just over a week before, which caused him a great deal of torment. He had read the words, his trembling hands trying to stop the shaking that was coursing through his body. The words that read, "You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" For many years, he had feared that maybe someone, somewhere, at some time, might find out about his namesake and make his life a living hell, maybe even murder him, with the idea that he was in some way engaged in the work carried out by that misguided and psychotic mass murderer, and had, somehow, missed out on receiving the same fate that had befallen the other members of the Nazi death squads. But he had been so careful, and had never told anyone of his former name, or his possible relationship to the Angel of Death at Auschwitz. So, how could someone have found out where he lived or worked? The only way out that he could think of was to go on the run, getting well away from anyone he had worked with and from where he had lived. He had no plan, just a crazed idea that he must stay out of sight in this empty building before he made his next move. All sorts of wild ideas coursing through his brain. Thoughts that he had never even dreamt about, up until now, came into his mind. It was a few weeks later in the office where Henry had formerly been employed, a place from which he had mysteriously disappeared some time previously, without explanation. One of the other employees who had worked with him had just read an article in the newspaper that had shocked him. It mentioned that his former workmate had been found dead in an abandoned building, having seemingly committed suicide by ingesting a cyanide pill. As tears welled up in his eyes, he murmured words that he found extremely difficult to say. "Henry, what happened? Why did you do it? Just as your friends here were organizing a surprise party for your birthday. You tried so hard to keep it a secret, and you thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" In the silence of ashes, Jacob's fingers trembled against the dented tin cup, water sloshing perilously close to the rim. The November air carved his lungs raw, bitter with smoke from chimneys that transformed flesh to ash. His worn shoes navigated the mud between barracks, sidestepping puddles that mirrored a colorless sky. At 13, Jacob had perfected invisibility. 3 years of silence, not by choice, but necessity after witnessing his father's execution, had rendered him a ghost among the living dead that shuffled through the camp. while other boys his age had been selected for immediate disposal. Jacob's muteness had ironically preserved him. The guards found utility in a servant who could never repeat their secrets, who existed in the peripheral shadows of their consciousness. The SS officers spoke freely in his presence. Plans whispered, transports scheduled, executions ordered, all captured in the flawless vault of Jacob's mind, where every detail existed in perfect recall, a gift that had once earned him praise from teachers in another lifetime. Before yellow stars and cattle cars, Obersturmführer Kruger waited in his usual spot, a folding chair positioned in the sliver of shade beside Barracks 7. Jacob knew the man's habits with precision. The hat removal, 17 minutes into his shift. The triple tap of his boot before sitting. The heavy eyes, exactly 40 minutes after lunch. "Schneller, Junge!" Kruger barked, gesturing impatiently as Jacob approached. Jacob quickened his pace, keeping his eyes fixed on the shallow pool of water in the cup. One did not look directly at the gods of this underworld, the men who decided with casual flicks of their fingers who would breathe another day and who would feed the insatiable furnaces. Kruger snatched the cup, gulping noisily. Water escaped his lips, tracking through the dust on his chin. Jacob stood motionless, hands clasped before him, awaiting dismissal or further orders. The guard's eyes were bloodshot, the whites yellowed like old paper. Night duty in the processing center, Jacob surmised. New transports had arrived yesterday, which always meant sleepless shifts for the guards. "Wait," Kruger muttered, settling deeper into his chair. "I might want more." Jacob nodded once, the barest acknowledgement of the command. He knew stillness, as others knew prayer. A ritual of survival, practiced until it became reflex. The camp existed in constant motion, guards shouting, prisoners shuffling, machine guns occasionally stuttering their terrible poetry of death. To be still was to disappear. Minutes stretched. Kruger's head gradually lolled forward, his breathing deepening. The cup tilted dangerously in his loosening grip. Jacob watched through lowered lashes as the guard surrendered to sleep. The keys hanging from Kruger's belt caught the weak sunlight, transforming ordinary metal into something mythic. Freedom incarnate. Jacob's pulse accelerated, blood rushing in his ears like distant artillery. No guard ever slept on duty. The punishment was severe. Perhaps not death, but certainly disgrace. This aberration might never repeat itself. A singular crack in the impenetrable wall of captivity. Jacob's mind calculated with the precision of mathematics. 4 minutes until the patrol passed the northern fence. 7 minutes until roll call at the women's barracks would divert attention eastward. The electric generator hummed 60 meters to the west, powering the final barrier between imprisonment and possibility. His fingers trained by years of obedience, trembled with rebellion as they reached toward the key ring. A lifetime compressed into a single breath as metal brushed against metal with the whisper of butterfly wings. The ring slid free. Jacob backed away silently, the keys clutched against his chest like a talisman. The dormant power they represented sent electric currents through his body, awakening nerves long numbed by survival. For the first time in 3 years, a ghost became solid. A shadow contemplated substance. A boy allowed himself to remember the concept of hope. The keys felt impossibly heavy in Jacob's pocket as he slipped between the skeletal shadows of barracks. His mind projected every detail of the camp upon the canvas of his consciousness. A perfect map etched by thousands of forced errands. There, the blind spot behind the infirmary, where guards rarely patrolled. Here, the drainage ditch that ran beneath the eastern fence, partially obscured by withered weeds. Each movement demanded precision as afternoon shadows stretched across the packed earth. Jacob became one with them. Another darkness moving among darkness, his emaciated form barely disturbing the air. The camp's architecture revealed itself differently now. What had been a prison became a puzzle box, and Jacob held the solution in his trembling hand. 327 steps to the generator shed, a left turn at the kitchens, skirt the infirmary, avoid the dogs kenneled near the northern guard tower. Gunther, the shepherd with the white spot on his muzzle, raised his head as Jacob passed downwind. The animal's ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. Jacob froze, becoming stone. The dog's amber eyes held his for an eternal moment before dismissing him. Just another walking skeleton, carrying neither food nor threat. Jacob released the breath he'd been holding and continued his careful trajectory toward freedom. The world had shrunk to immediate sensations. Ribs against lungs, the metallic taste of fear, fabric against skin. Nothing existed beyond this moment of movement, this singular pursuit of escape. A sudden commotion erupted near the eastern fence. Jacob pressed himself against Barracks 12, becoming one with its weathered planks as 2 guards rushed past. Not for him, not yet. The keys remained undiscovered. As the guards disappeared, Jacob continued his journey through the camp's service areas, places where a silent child became as invisible as dust motes in sunlight. He reached the narrow passage between buildings where mud gave way to gravel, treacherous ground that might announce his presence. Jacob moved with the deliberate care of a tightrope walker. Testing each step, a soft sound stopped him. A whimper, barely audible, drifting from beneath the elevated supply depot. Jacob hesitated, freedom calling from just beyond. The sensible choice was clear. Continue escape, survive. Yet he found himself crouching, peering into the darkness beneath the structure. 5 pairs of eyes reflected the meager light. Children, younger than himself, huddled together like rabbits in a warren. Their gaunt faces registered shock at his discovery. One boy raised a finger to cracked lips, pleading for silence that Jakob had mastered years ago. They had escaped a selection. That much was obvious. Children deemed too small for work were immediate candidates for the chambers. These 5 had somehow slipped away, hiding in this temporary sanctuary, while death searched elsewhere. Jacob knew their fate was sealed. The hiding place would be discovered within hours. The dogs would find them, or hunger would drive them into the open. Their brief rebellion against inevitability would end as all rebellions did in this place, with smoke rising from chimneys. His hand closed around the keys in his pocket. One boy, for certain, could navigate the camp's dangers. 5 children multiplied the risk exponentially. Mathematics again. Probability, chance, the cold equations of survival. The smallest child, a girl with eyes too large for her hollowed face, extended one skeletal hand toward him, not begging, not pleading, offering connection, humanity. Something the camp had systematically stripped away layer by layer until only animal survival remained. Jacob's memory flashed to his father's final words before the guards beat him silent. Remember who you are. He made his decision with quick, efficient gestures. Jacob motioned for them to follow. The children untangled themselves from their hiding place, emerging like shadows gaining substance. Their movements were clumsy with fear and weakness, but their eyes held absolute focus on Jacob, their unexpected savior, their silent Moses. The smallest girl slipped her hand into his. Her palm was fever hot against his cold fingers. The contact sent electricity through Jacob's arm, awakening something long dormant. Responsibility, connection, purpose beyond mere survival. Together, they became a small constellation of desperate stars, moving through the gathering twilight toward the generator shed and the possibility of freedom beyond. The generator shed vibrated at the camp's edge. Its drone masked 6 pairs of feet, navigating between the fences as Jacob led with a cartographer's confidence. Evening patrol would begin in 17 minutes. Searchlights would sweep the eastern perimeter in 12. The rhythm of the camp's security beat within Jacob's consciousness, like a second heartbeat. The smallest girl, her name yet unspoken between them, clung to his hand with surprising strength. Behind them, the other children followed in a chain of desperate hope, each grasping the clothing of the one ahead. Their collective breath formed ghostly plumes in the November air, spectral evidence of lives not yet extinguished. Jacob reached the generator shed's rusted door. 3 keys tried, 3 keys rejected, before the 4th slid home. The lock surrendered with a reluctant click that seemed thunderous in his heightened awareness. He ushered the children inside, pulling the door closed behind them. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the red glow of indicator lights. The smell of oil and metal replaced the camp's perpetual stench of suffering. The generator's pulse vibrated through the concrete floor into their bones. Jacob's memory reconstructed the shed's interior with perfect clarity. He had been brought here once to clean grease spills, one of countless menial tasks assigned to the camp's silent shadow. His fingers traced metal casings and wire housing until he found what he sought, the main control panel. Behind him, the children huddled together for warmth and courage. The oldest boy, perhaps 10, whispered something in Polish that Jacob couldn't understand. The words dissolved into the mechanical growl surrounding them. Language had become irrelevant. Only action mattered now. Through the shed's single grimy window, Jacob watched lights flicker on across the camp as day surrendered to evening. Searchlights awakened, their harsh beams cutting white arcs through gathering darkness. Guards emerged from barracks, rifles slung across shoulders. Somewhere, Obersturmführer Kruger would be awakening to the realization of his catastrophic error. Jacob's hands hovered over the generator's controls. His perfect memory recalled every wire, every connection observed during his brief exposure to the machine's inner workings. Disabling it would plunge the camp into darkness and deactivate the electrified fence. But the backup systems would engage within minutes. Their window for escape would be measured in heartbeats. A distant alarm shattered the twilight, a shrill mechanical scream that announced discovery. Whether Kruger's missing keys or the children's absence had triggered it remained unknown. The distinction was academic. The hunt had begun. The smallest girl pressed herself against Jacob's side, her body trembling like a captured bird. He placed a reassuring hand on her head, then turned his attention back to the generator. Its massive form contained both their imprisonment and their salvation. Jacob seized a wrench from a nearby workbench and wedged it between critical gears. With calculated force, he twisted until metal screamed against metal. Sparks erupted in blue-white constellations, reflected in the wide eyes of the watching children. The generator's rhythm faltered, coughed, then disintegrated into mechanical death throes. Lights across the camp flickered, dimmed, and died. Darkness descended like a blessing, punctuated only by the crimson pulse of emergency lights and the distant, frantic beams of guards' flashlights. Jacob yanked the shed door open. Freedom waited in the gathering night, separated from them by a single fence now rendered harmless. He gestured urgently to the children, pointing toward the eastern boundary, where forest began 200 meters beyond the perimeter. Dogs barked in the distance, savage, hungry sounds that accelerated their terror into action. The children poured from the shed like water finding its level, Jacob bringing up the rear. The smallest girl's hand remained locked in his as they navigated by instinct and starlight toward the fence. With his free hand, Jacob tested the metal mesh. No electricity hummed beneath his fingertips. The backup generators had not yet engaged. He boosted the smallest children over first, their bird-like bodies barely disturbing the wire. The older ones climbed with desperate strength, tumbling to freedom on the other side. As searchlights swept closer and dogs barking intensified, Jacob hoisted himself upward, muscles straining against the weight of exhaustion and malnutrition. Barbed wire tore through his threadbare clothing, carving shallow furrows into his flesh. Pain registered as distant information, irrelevant to the imperative of movement. He dropped to the ground beyond the fence, landing beside the waiting children. The absent hum of electricity had been replaced by shouts and whistles, the camp awakening to their rebellion. Jacob pointed toward the dark line of trees in the distance. "Run," he mouthed silently, the word forming on lips that had forgotten speech. Together, they fled across open ground, 6 shadows merging with the greater darkness. Behind them, flashlight beams swept the area around the disabled generator. Ahead, the forest promised concealment, if not safety. The space between represented the most dangerous passage of their lives. Exposed, vulnerable, illuminated by nothing but faith and starlight. The forest swallowed them whole. Pine needles cushioned their footfalls as the scent of resin replaced the camp's miasma with air that tasted of possibility. Jacob led them deeper into the wilderness, away from searchlights that strafed the forest edge like mechanical predators. Behind them, the camp's alarms continued their frantic cry, a sound that diminished with each step, but remained embedded in their consciousness like a splinter beneath skin. The smallest girl stumbled, her strength finally failing. Jacob caught her before she fell, lifting her slight weight into his arms. She weighed no more than autumn leaves, her bones fragile as a bird's, beneath his hands. Her head came to rest against his shoulder, absolute trust in the gesture. They continued for what might have been hours or minutes. Time had dissolved into meaningless abstraction. Distance alone mattered now. Every meter gained was a victory against death. The other children followed Jacob without question, their faith in his silent guidance absolute. A stream appeared, silver in the moonlight. Jacob gestured for them to drink. The water tasted of stone and stars, reviving something beyond their physical bodies. Perhaps hope, perhaps humanity. The oldest boy spoke, his voice a rusty hinge breaking the forest's solemn quiet. Müssen wir weitergehen? Must we go further? Jacob nodded, pointing deeper into the forest. The danger had not passed. Dogs could track them for kilometers. Morning would bring planes, searchers, consequences. The Reich did not surrender its prisoners easily, especially those who carried knowledge of what transpired behind electrified fences. The smallest girl stirred in his arms, her eyes reflecting fragments of moonlight. Her lips moved, forming words that emerged as a whisper. Jak się nazywasz? What is your name? The question penetrated layers of silence, built over years of survival. Jacob hadn't heard his own name spoken aloud since his father's death. It existed only in memory, a secret thing preserved from contamination by the camp's horrors. His throat constricted around unspoken syllables. Speech had become foreign territory, a country from which he had been exiled. Yet something stirred within the wasteland of his voice, a seed breaking through frozen ground after endless winter. Jacob, he whispered, the sound strange and wonderful in the forest's embrace. His voice emerged broken, raw with disuse, but undeniably his own. Jestem Jakob. I am Jacob. The girl's smile transformed her hollow face, revealing the ghost of beauty that starvation had nearly erased. Estera, she replied, offering her name as a gift in exchange for his. The other children murmured their own names: Tomasz, Lilka, Beniek, David. Each syllable a reclamation of identity. The camp had attempted to replace with numbers. They stood in a tight circle beneath the ancient pines, no longer prisoners, not yet survivors, suspended in the fragile space between captivity and freedom. A distant howl shattered their momentary peace, the unmistakable voice of a tracking dog catching their scent. The hunt continued. Jacob set Estera gently on her feet and pointed westward, where the forest grew denser, offering deeper concealment. Musimy biec, Estera said with quiet resolve. We must run. Jacob nodded, taking her hand once more. Together, they plunged deeper into the wilderness. 6 children against an empire, armed with nothing but the desperate courage of those with nothing left to lose. The forest embraced them, branches parting to accept their flight, roots steadying their uncertain steps. Dawn found them huddled beneath a rocky overhang beside a wider stream. Exhaustion had claimed the younger children, while Jacob remained awake, listening to the forest's morning chorus, replacing the mechanized rhythms of captivity. Estera sat beside him, her slight shoulder pressed against his arm. Dokund Ajemi. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely audible above the stream's gentle murmur. Jacob's mind, so accustomed to precision and calculation, could offer no certain answer. The geography of freedom remained unmapped territory. He had memorized every centimeter of captivity, but possessed no chart for liberation. The words came slowly. Na południa, du partyzantów. South, to the partisans. Rumors had circulated through the camp. Resistance fighters in the southern forests, Jews and Poles who had escaped, fighting with salvaged weapons and desperate courage. Perhaps only legend, perhaps salvation. Estera's small hand found his, fingers intertwining. Będziemy wolni. We will be free. Jacob looked at the sleeping children, at the forest stretching around them, at morning light filtering between trees. Freedom remained a distant shore, separated by hunger, winter, pursuit, and war. Yet for the first time in 3 years, possibility existed. He squeezed Estera's hand gently and discovered within himself the capacity for speech once more. Words emerged like water from stone, each one a small miracle of reclamation. Już jesteśmy. We already are. The forest absorbed his words, carrying them toward the lightening sky. Behind them, the camp continued its grim business. Ahead, war raged. But here, 6 children had rewritten the equations of their existence beyond barbed wire and numbered tattoos. Jacob tilted his face toward the breaking day, feeling warmth touch his skin. His voice, newly rediscovered, held steady as he spoke again. Not to Estera, not to the sleeping children, but to the memory of his father that he carried within. I remember who I am. They're coming. They're coming. The whispers carried by the wind, the repeat of words started yesterday morning, from the moment my bare feet touched the wooden planks of the wrapped-around porch. The corn swayed slowly. Anticipation, knowing they would soon pick up their speed. Sounds of the horses shifting around the fields, anxiety fueling them. They knew just as well as I did what was to come. The clouds in the distance were dense. The light around the house shined bright for now. The blanket of clouds would take that away. Soon, too soon. The pitter-patter of little feet sounded from behind me. A hand wrapping around my finger, giving a slight tug. Her bright blue eyes would be boring into me. Those beautiful eyes she adopted from her father. If only he was here, they wouldn't be coming. They would leave us be. They would keep their distance. They knew what the consequences were, but no contact, no letters, no information of where he was or when he would come home, left us in the foreboding shadows. The war was bound to come. Unfortunately, we knew that. The day the papers came, he looked at me. The look of knowing all too well. He would be called upon. leaving us to fend for ourselves, while he went God knows where to defend the great land we call home. The last letter received was over a month ago now. We sent one in return within the week. Concerns the officers would come bringing devastating news filled the house, weighing the air down. Another tug released me from my trance. I looked down, mustering a smile as best I could. Guiding her back into the house, setting her up in the chair for breakfast. Eggs, toast, and fresh bacon from one of the sows lay in front of her. Coffee was the choice for me. Hunger was gone. I felt nothing of the sorts. Thirst controlled me. Coffee, water, and milk satisfied me for the time being. A bang sounded outside. My eyes snapped to see through the fogged window from grime. Something else to add to my list of things to do. The dust and dirt picking up from the fields created a layer. A goat was taking time to practice butting again, lining up to go again with one of the poles surrounding them. The clouds were closer. Too much to do before they would be here. Too little time. Another tug. This time, my dress. I felt the hole in the side tear a little bit more. Another thing to fix around this place. I turned. Her shoes were on her feet, and mine were in her hands. The plate behind her was polished off, and the cup with remnants of milk sat beside it. Her head cocked to the side. A nod returned. Sliding my feet into my boots, we headed out to accomplish the never-ending tasks plaguing us. Night fell quickly, and the clouds were almost here. By morning, they would be on top of us. The sounds of the restless animals in the barn through the open window next to my bed. Creaks of the old house moving with the wind called out in various parts. The nerves, the knowing of what's coming, getting to me, all while she slept peacefully in her bed. No worries in the world, aside from making sure the animals were happy, and her father was okay. The adolescent hopes and dreams occupying her mind. Mine was screaming at me. Too many thoughts, too many fears, all flicking through, ready to explode out. The hope of tea helping the pain and pressure, all while it did nothing at all. It usually did not. But I lived by it, as my mother had too. Lessons she taught me, guided me quite frequently. That being just one of them. They're coming. I shuddered with the wind as it brought that news. Constant reminders. I wanted to scream out. I know all too well. Instead, I stayed quiet, fighting to go to sleep to earn some peace. Peace would not come, however. My dreams would be filled with thoughts of them coming. My husband, my child not getting everything they need. The idea of peace is just that. An idea, a hope. There was none for me. The sounds were pounding by the time my eyes opened. Light barely came through the windows. The clouds were here, and so was the shadow. My feet pounded, carrying me out onto the porch. The corn stalks now looked like they were laying down, the wind rearing its ugly face. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. The words pounded into me. My eyes watered, dirt flying into them. I felt my way to the sink, rinsing them out as best I could. Turning, she was behind me again, head cocked to the side. Quickly fixing oatmeal, she ate while I worried. Opting to give her time off today, I set her up with her favorite things in the living room. Not before getting her dressed in her Sunday best. No hair out of place, and a bow matching her shoes. The wind howled outside. They're coming, quickly. I needed to get everything done, quickly. Forgetting my shoes, I headed to the barn, multitasking, not without dropping things. The grime now covered me, just as it did the windows. Hurry. You must hurry. Stepping out of the barn, a cloud of dust was nearing. Pounding of horseshoes coming down the way, carried with the wind, just as the words did. They're coming. Minutes. A matter of minutes. And they would be here. The dust rounded the drive at the far end of the field. My feet ran me into the house and to the bathroom. Grabbing a cloth, I wet it down and scrubbed at my flesh. The grime coming off. Slowly it felt. I was running out of time. Finally, getting the last mark off, I put my Sunday best on, running my fingers through my hair. Standing in the doorway, she was beside me, watching the cloud of dust get closer. They're coming. The wind howled again. They're coming.